The Gorge. I remember finding myself coming out of a haze. I felt comfortable, but I was lying in a bed in hospital. I seemed very much alone. Someone was asking me to open my eyes. Without going into too much detail, I had been involved in an accident which had left me with broken bones to my leg and my arm. It's odd how you can't seem to remember the pain. I know I was suffering. The next day, after the plaster was finally applied and set, I asked if I could be wheeled outside into the garden that overlooked the town. I took an orange from a bowl beside my bed with me. I asked the nurse if I could just sit for a while. She left me in peace. I tried to peel the orange, but found that it was just impossible. I was emotionally a broken man, body and mind. I blurted out to the sky, "Why me?" and burst into tears. A short time later, a different nurse arrived. We chatted for a short time about my predicament. Things happen and you'll find things quite different for a while. Some people burst into tears, she said. I laughed uncontrollably. I've already done that. I've always wanted to be different, not like everybody else, a unique person. Bursting into tears like everybody else, not my style. I looked out to the horizon, to my house, and thought of the gorge that led down to the ocean. I would trek from my home that overlooked the mighty gorge all the way to the coast, to the favourite holiday spot of my childhood days. I had firmly established in my mind to mend this shattered body and take myself on an adventure. Of course, over the next 5 months, everything happened that I hoped wouldn't. My body lost so much muscle. It didn't work properly anymore. The left side of my body had to learn all over again. It seemed to be paralysed. I was still determined to follow a plan that would lead to doing the gorge trek. I bought a backpack and a tent, plus all the necessary equipment for a 4 to 5 day trek. I started walks around the rim of the gorge to where the cedar getters had their steam winch. I wonder what they were like. Each day must have been an adventure. Looking down and imagining my approaching adventure. 6 kilometres a day for 3 months, a 10-kilo pack to begin with, working up to 16. Sir Edmund Hillary carried 30 kilos up to the top of Mount Everest. I found that 16 was my limit. My youthful strength gone forever. Closing in on the planned commencement of my adventure, I thought about issues of safety and responsibility to my family. Should I go alone or find a trekking companion? Who could I ask? It all became too difficult. A part cripple going down to the most difficult terrain. There needs to be danger. Not just perceived danger. Are there snakes? I knew there were wild dingoes and goats, and further down there were wild brumbies. My first attempt to clamber down the acutely steep and shifting terrain took me closer to death than ever before. I had made an odd decision. I'd taken the wrong route. I'd ended up 20 metres below the ridge, hanging onto a decaying root of a sapling. Below me, just metres away, a 60-metre drop. I carefully removed my 16-kilo pack and for the next 2 hours edged my way back up to the top. Once standing on top again, I swore I would eat humble pie and walk away from this adventure, all the time knowing that I would weaken and try again. I still remember the process of that weakening. It took 3 days after the life-threatening ordeal to get back on the road, walking again with added dedication to the task ahead. 6 weeks later, I climbed the dingo fence and walked across the paddock to the correct starting point. A few weeks before, my wife had greeted me one morning that the marriage was over. The accident must have changed me. Was I still the same man? I felt the same, but my body was that of an old man. I had noticed that I could accept injections and the like without collapsing. The sight of a needle would send me crashing to the floor. I had to lie down each time a needle approached me. It's over. She felt a little guilty. I told her to forget her vows. I felt sick to the core. I had loved her. and now I suffer from vertigo and claustrophobia. I must have changed. The trip down the acutely steep cliff-like terrain was 2 hours of near-death experiences. The danger real. I drank 2 litres of water as I struggled to balance the pack on my weak shoulders. Someone had told me to take a bit of string. My pack was overbearing already, however I took a length of old Telstra rope. This rope proved to be a lifesaver. I used it to semi-abseil all the way down to the bottom, the last 3 metres dangling like a rotten corpse. At one stage having to dive across the escarpment from one sapling to the next. I found myself short on a rope on one occasion. My life depended on the strength of a tiny plant. I measured the rope after the event was all over. 50 metres. A piece of string. I'd actually needed it to be 51. When I finally reached the bottom, I just laid straight down on the rocky creek bed and went to sleep. On awakening, I felt elated and trapped. I now had no alternative but to head down the gorge. Returning up the cliff was impossible. There was an interesting old tree at the bottom. It had a hole the size of a fist, probably a rotted knot. I wrote a short note, got a $1 coin out of my pocket, placed them both in a small plastic bag and left them in the tree. If someone ever asks me for $1, I'll tell them where they can find one. For the next 3 days I scrambled over boulders, lowering myself down small, dry waterfalls, intent on not tripping or injuring myself. At one stage on the first day, I had to strip off and wade 5 metres through bitterly cold, dark, chest-deep water. I'm not into ghosts, but I thought of the men who must have had to do the same when traversing this section of the gorge. I came across a dead scrub turkey, freshly killed, but an absolutely featherless, fleshless, eyeless head. There was a scuffle above in the foliage. A huge bird flapped ingloriously away. I had been advised to take a bottle of Coke. I was supposed to save this up for the celebration of sorts at the end of my day. My strength waned. It lasted till 11 on the second day. Golden syrup on bread for breakfast and the noodles. I thought about religion, tried to write a lyric for a song, but the effort put in placing each foot in front of the other so as to not fall or trip needed all of my concentration. I wondered if there was someone out there in this world who would find me and be happy with what I am. I came across a weathered backpack hanging on a tree. It was decayed and had been there quite a while. Later I was told that another adventurer had merely panicked and scarpered up the steep slope. Carrying a backpack up such a steep cliff would have been futile. A lyrebird, a freshly killed kangaroo with no tail, dingoes howling at night. An incredible moment occurred on the third day. A mob of wild brumbies. The stallion spotted me almost as I spotted him. He aroused all his girls and clattered away across the rocks and boulders. I felt proud and exhilarated. As the terrain widened out, I realised that I had a chance of making it to my destination, the stockyards. A 6-hour march on the last day led me to a small waterhole. I bathed with an eel and a small fish, and then on to the river. Funnily enough, only 200 metres away. I staggered in like a silly old drunk. I swam. I floated. I'd slept amongst the dingoes. I'd walked where only the brave would go. Wild horses. Free. I was so proud.